So, Tom, breaking news. There is now, I'm seeing this literally just moments ago, an application for a class action lawsuit has been filed over the ArriveCan app. Listen to this.
So, how did the government go so wrong with the ArriveCan app contracting and development, and do you take responsibility for those failures?
There continue to be ongoing investigations, both external and otherwise, into the contracting process. It is obvious that the contracting process rules were not followed in this case.
Really?
And we need to make sure that there is accountability and transparency around that. But let us remember that during the pandemic, we were reaching out to try and keep people safe, keep people alive, make sure that our economy didn't falter at a time where everything was in question. Even in those most difficult times, we need to make sure the rules were followed. When public servants, in this case, did not follow the rules adequately, there are investigations and there will be consequences.
You know, at some point, Tom, he just needs to stop talking, doesn't he? He just digs that hole a little deeper by going on. So it's not a comma. It should have been a period.
Yes.
So it's obvious, he admits, that the rules were not followed. That's a huge admission. And then today, literally moments ago, as I said, application for a class action lawsuit. What are you thinking here?
Well, the class action lawsuit will probably be going after things other than the money we've thrown out the window on this thing. How the app hurt people by making them lose days of their lives because the thing was telling them that they had to quarantine and so forth. Yeah. So, yes, I'm not surprised at that one at all. With regard to Trudeau, I mean, he's talking about the importance of transparency and accountability, but I noticed that the question was, do you accept responsibility? And he talked around it ad nauseum for a couple of minutes.
That's unusual.
And never answered the question.
Yeah.
And he says, well, it's obvious that somebody's going to be held accountable, but we have a system of government where it's ministers who are held accountable. And who's the head of the ministers? Oh, we have a word for it. It's the prime minister. But I guess it doesn't really apply because Trudeau never accepts responsibility for anything. Look, this is a boondoggle. This company was getting contracts from the federal Liberal government well before the pandemic, so even that thin excuse doesn't hold. And it's not true that you can take an $80,000 job, because that's about what it would have been to build an app, and somehow blow it into minimum $59.5 million just for that one contract, but there were many, many, many others to this too. There's a big debate about this. Did they have 2 employees or 4 employees? Well, maybe that's something that we can find out when we get accountability and transparency. But look, this is a boondoggle by any description. In my thinking, this is on a par, at least, with the sponsorship scandal. Why? Well, in the sponsorship scandal, yes, we had ne'er-do-wells taking bogus reports, photocopying them, and resubmitting a bill. But here, based on my decades in government, I've never seen a case where something like this could happen and there wasn't somebody closing their eyes. There wasn't somebody saying, we're just going to let this go through. Don't worry about it. And that's what's going to be interesting. Who was making that call and calling that shot? That's what we'll probably never find out, certainly not before the next election.
Do you think, by the way, to Trudeau's comment about, we had a pandemic, you can use the term extenuating circumstances here to suggest that, in regular times, perhaps we could accept responsibility for someone having done this. Does that carry any weight given the fact we were in the middle of a pandemic when this happened or not?
What carries some weight with regard to the pandemic, and you and I this was a conversation we had during the pandemic, they're putting together programs super fast, right? And they're saying, okay, we've got millions of Canadian families who have lost their livelihood. They've got to put food on the table. The bureaucrats have come up with something far too complicated. You push that aside. There's going to be a bit more fraud, and you'll try to collect as much of it as you can after, but you're making it your priority to help people. Nobody's going to say that that was a problem. That is due to the pandemic. That is, okay, we can't do this in the normal way, letting the bureaucrats weigh every comma and semicolon in the program. We're going to push money out the door, and too bad if there's going to be a bit of fraud. That's okay. But what's happening here is they're trying to make us believe that because there's a pandemic, they go to a 2-man operation in the basement of a bungalow in Ottawa. They shovel out tens of millions of dollars. Nobody's paying any attention to the rules. Nobody's responsible. And this is because of the pandemic? Really? It's because of the pandemic that you gave tens of millions of dollars to a 2-man operation that clearly didn't know what the heck they were doing because the thing never really worked, and a good app on a good day, let's be generous, $100,000. And this was for a dog that wouldn't hunt, and it cost minimum $60 million. And the reason we say minimum and we don't know the real number is because there is no transparency. There is no accountability. Last week, Karen Hogan, the Auditor General of Canada, said she had never seen a case like this where there was such bad bookkeeping, she can't even get to the bottom number. And this is something that Trudeau is responsible for as the prime minister. He doesn't get to plead, that this was because of the emergency of the pandemic. Yes, the pandemic was a huge emergency. It doesn't excuse this. The two don't equate.
Last thing I want to bring up now, I hadn't spoken to you since Thursday, and it seems to me on Thursday, Pierre Poilievre brought up your name, what you just said.
I know.
This was, the same as or perhaps worse than the sponsorship scandal for this government. Did you have any idea that was going to happen, that he would quote from?
No. And I was smiling because it was one of those days, it had been getting quite hot in question periods. So sometimes I just make sure I push aside a bit of time so I can actually watch the interplay and watch how they're behaving with each other. And what was interesting to me is, one, he referenced the article that I had just written, which was interesting in and of itself. But then he swung around and his target was Jagmeet Singh. And he said, even your former leader is saying that Trudeau is a bad. Why do you keep supporting Trudeau? So he turned it into a bit of a comedy routine at the end, and he had far too much fun doing it. But hey, any time one of your commentary pieces gets picked up as part of an answer and question period, I'll take it.
Good for you. Let me move on to the other story that's gaining traction again. This came out about a week or so ago. This idea, I think Benoit Dubreuil, who's the French language commissioner, brought this up at one point about immigrants coming here and how much money it was going to cost Quebec to basically, if they wanted to, learn French. And I think the number was over $1 billion, probably closer to $2 billion. Now the government, Quebec, is asking to be reimbursed, not the first time, for the money that they have spent from Ottawa on refugee services, and that's at around $1 billion. So, as I said, it's come up before. It's back in the news now. How do the feds get out of this one?
They won't. And this is Legault playing hardball, the same way Olivia Chow, the mayor of Toronto, played hardball with Trudeau, and she won. I don't know if you recall what happened in her case, but she had so many refugee and asylum claimants in her city. She said to Trudeau, I'm already raising my city's taxes 10% this year because there's been inflation and everything else. But I'm going to add on another 6%, and it's going to be the Trudeau tax of 6% because you're not giving me the money that it's costing my city to take care of a problem you've caused by letting in this many people and having a border system that's absolutely broken. Out of nowhere, Trudeau was able to produce the cash, and she backed down, and he backed down. She got the money that she'd been asking for. A few weeks ago, Legault sent in Christine Fréchette, the immigration minister. She pleaded her case ably. She just said, look, this is how much it's costing us, more than what it should be, and we need this help from the feds. Their number then was something in the $450 million range, if memory serves. Mark Miller was sent in to deliver the answer from the feds. Here's $100 million, go home and leave us alone. Today, much stronger plea. They brought in Drainville, the education minister, who explained that the number of children of asylum seekers are filling 1,500 plus classrooms. That's the number of students divided by, the number of kids in a class. That's 1,500 classrooms. And the same thing's happening in the health sector. The same thing's happening in other sectors. We're just not prepared for the numbers that are coming in. I almost joke about this when I hear it. C'est la faute du fédéral. It's Ottawa's fault. But in this case, the responsibility is clearly on Ottawa's shoulders. Quebec has nothing to do with this. It's got its own categories that it is responsible for, not this one. This is the feds. And it's not fair because they had the minister who's in charge of welfare payments in the province of Quebec, and she said, look, here are the numbers. The feds can't even deliver the work permits on time, which means that people by default, we're not going to leave them without any money to put food on their tables. They get welfare. But so many of them are getting welfare because they can't get they want to work. But the feds are so disorganized they can't even issue the work permits on time. So again, this is something that is fair ball. The one person who I think went completely offside today was Minister Roberge. It's not the first time. And, he was into one of these we, they things, and this could, have a real effect on who we are and our culture and the whole bit. And I find it a real shame because this was a sincere plea for the feds to pony up the cash for a problem that they're responsible for. And instead of trying to get everybody on side, as usual, Minister Roberge was doing something very divisive. And I think it was a huge mistake on his part. And I think that he's going to pay for it long term because it reminded me of what I had heard from Jean Boulet during the last election campaign. It's one of these,
immigrants,
things that are very, very bad territory for a minister of any government to go into. And I think Roberge really sullied himself with this today.
All right. Tom, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again on Thursday.
Take good care.